Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Reads Podcast, the show where I talk about books and only books and everything book related. And today I am joined by Miss Angela Page. Angela is the writer and producer of edgy films and books, including Enrico G, which is a historical fiction based on her great grandmother, a culinary murderer. There's a Dead Girl in My Yard, as well as the award-winning short dark comedy film Harji Wed Sajele about jury murder in India. Angela is the president of the South Florida chapter of the Women's National Book Association, founded back in 1917. And she organizes and conducts workshops and panels serving the local literary community. Recent articles map her research and journey on the historical events aligned with her Italian family saga and making her ancestors, even the controversial ones, compelling characters. So she's here. She's going to share a little bit more about her backstory in writing the books that she has come out with, and just have a very open and good conversation about her books and stuff. So, Angela, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast today. I am really looking forward to hearing your story, and welcome to Southern Reads.
Good. Thanks so much, Noah, for having me.
So, you have been a writer for a few years, and you've been uh, had a lot of good works that have been written and produced and have been published. But share with me a little bit about what kind of inspired you to become a author in the first place.
Well, I wrote short stories at the beginning, and it took me a while to get published, but I finally did get published. But I also was drawn to playwriting, and that actually was my first venture in getting produced. A produced playwright was back a while ago, back when I lived in London. And that started me going. And I did that simultaneously with working in corporate. So I was kind of had dual careers going on, the writing on the side, producing theater, and that morphed into film later on when film became cheaper to produce than it was when I first started.
So how did you started out doing edgy films and then you kind of dabbled into books. How do you manage different writing styles when it comes to writing for films versus writing for books?
Well, it's amazing how when you get an idea or somebody proposes something or you want to have something based on your own life, you have to decide whether it's a play, it's a book, it's a film, it's a short story. So, a case in point was when one of the actors that was in one of my short films said to me that she was very upset because there's a dead girl in my yard, she said. And I thought, that's something. I don't know if it's a book, if it's a film, it's a TV show or a short story, but let's pursue that. And it was based on a real story. So that was a case where you really think hard as to what the material is. Now, I've also re-engineered material where I wrote a script and then I adapted to the stage and it was produced. That was Legal Gringa, and that was produced in Tampa a few years ago through a festival. And oddly enough, because we did such a thorough job at the backstory of the characters, that now has become a book as well in process. So this last one, Enrico G, started out as a script as well, just of the incident of my great grandfather dealing with the Nazis during World War II. And so I knew that was a film. I was told by a director in Hollywood. And then eventually somebody said you ought to write the book. And so this latest release, Enrico G, is the book, but it started out as a film script.
So how did you make transition from the corporate world to the entertainment and publishing industries?
Well, I kind of had my feet in both, on and off for a long time. Of course, you get interrupted by, raising children and responsibilities as I was traveling globally for a long time. And so my expectations of getting things published was low because I didn't have the time. But once I was freed up and I left corporate, it was basically time to do the run. Just all speed, what they call it, full speed ahead. And I so the thing was I didn't just start when I left corporate. I had already been writing for theater and had short stories published, and I was already doing some film scripts. So I didn't start suddenly from nowhere. I already had some contacts in LA, and so that was helpful because if you start from scratch, it takes a little bit longer. But I kind of had a head start. And I tell you, corporate can provide besides being financially, making you financially secure, I would get I'd say inspiration by some of the stories that I heard, from the corporate world, and that really inspired me, and also to learn personalities and characters and dialogue, and be very aware that these are all potential fodder for your work.
Your characters that you have in the books are sort of based off of real life characters, especially even your family. How do you come up with your characters, and how does your family feel about you using them as kind of an inspiration for the characters?
Great question. Well, of course, most of the characters in my book with my great grandfather are have passed on, but there's obviously I have cousins and aunts and uncles, that knew these people, and so far everybody's been very welcoming. Although I did do a lot of fiction, I put a lot of fictional events in the story, but my great grandfather's life was so dynamic that I didn't need to put a lot in there because he already had lived such a versatile and controversial life. And I think that they are just welcoming the fact that we're highlighting and highlighting what he did and his courage, and also how he navigated. And obviously, we wouldn't have been able to do what we're doing now in the United States, or even in Italy as well, with his descendants, without him having behaved the way he did.
Was there a family member that's kind of been the overall main character that you've really stemmed from and have really based a lot of your books on? Has one kind of stood out more than the other?
Well, both my great grandfathers were quite, I'd say, dynamic characters, very fierce, and had many battles on both sides. So one great grandfather was Spanish from Barcelona, and he took part in the protests of anarchists and atheists back in 1913 in Barcelona. And so it was kind of inspiring to hear what his life was like. And on top of which, he was a union organizer back in Spain, and also when he came to the United States. So they had a lot of I'd say socialist leanings, that mixed with, of course, the atheism, which was unusual. My Italian great grandfather, whom I wrote about, was equally as dynamic, and his journey was very different. He came back and forth from Italy to the U.S. 16 times, and also battled the mafia, and then of course the Nazis after that. That sort of courage, that really rings true. And you wonder, what would you do in that situation when some invading force comes and occupies your house? How would you react? And that's always fascinated me about these characters.
So, when it comes to publishing, I know that there's kind of a different process with books compared to films. Would you say that the publishing process for books is easier than films, or which one do you see is more easier?
It's very different. It depends. I mean, I produce short films to now, and hopefully I'll have a feature soon. But of course, that process requires, some amount of money or somebody to invest in your film, and you have to have the crew and all this and the vision to do it. And I think actually, honestly, that doing the short films is actually an easier ride than finding a publisher, an agent, at this point. And so it's everybody's journey is different. But in my sense, it's been easier. I got the films off the ground before I got the books off the ground, let me put it that way. And I've been traditionally published, I've been self-published, and I also have been hybrid published. I don't know if you know about hybrid publishing.
I have not. That's a new term for me. What is
Yes.
hybrid
So
publishing?
hybrid is basically a model that's now become quite popular. There are a lot of hybrid publishers that are legitimate, and that is what they call cost sharing. So you get higher royalties for actually putting some money up to help produce your book, have your book published. And there's been some. It used to be there's also vanity publishing, and there's other ones that will do everything for you. But the hybrids, the true hybrids, they curate their books. They don't take anybody, so they won't because they have a reputation, and it's all through the Independent Book Publishing Association, and they're usually certified, and you have to do due diligence. So it's a more fast track than a traditional publisher, which could take a year, 2 years to get your book done. And if you want a fast track, you can go with you could self or you could do hybrid. And there's and the good publishers, hybrid publishers will actually help you marketing wise. They may not do everything, but they are basically they are a publisher in that sense.
That's That's a unique thing because I've only have ever heard about traditional and self-publishing. So that's actually a pretty interesting thing to really learn. My dog got really excited about hybrid publishing, so he went ballistic on
It
that.
is,
But
okay, so he knows it's a thing. He's a thing, yeah.
he
Yeah, no,
knows
when
it's a
I do
thing.
publishing workshops, we cover all three avenues for writers to look at. And it's an A, B, and C. If you're going to go through an agent or a traditional publisher to expect this, and self-publishing is obviously self-publishing. You can also hire companies to help you self-publish. That's another avenue as well. Every project is different and needs to, go through the vetting process of what you should do with it.
Now, do you plan on, because I know that you do some film and a lot of your books kind of stem from real life experiences. Do you plan on making any of your books kind of into short films, or do you try to keep it separate?
No, actually, the my second book, Suddenly Single Sylvia, became a short film. It's called just Sylvia. It's about a mature a divorcee who opens up a day coaching service for boomers. And there's also a dating guide in the book. And that actually got optioned as a series. And I worked for 6 months with a producer, a Emmy-winning producer, to make that into a pilot. And so I can prove that a self-published book can get optioned for a TV series, although we did have what they call proof of concept with a 10-minute short, which went around the festival. So that was one. The My very first film was off a short story called Unplugging Aunt Vera. And that's about an elderly retired dancer that ends up on life support after falling into a coma. And her living will denotes a stranger to pull her plug of her life support. That was a short story based on a real event. And the stranger turns out to be a sidekick who doesn't want to pull her plug. So, so that also, that very first film was based on a short story. Second one was based on a book, and the other two books, this last one has already a script attached to it.
So far from the books and that you have had published, what's been the overall reception that you've received so far?
Oh, I think it's been pretty good. I mean, obviously, it's not translating to sales, but I think that I've had great reviews on all four books at the moment, and I just want to just get the word out there. And this last one has gotten quite a lot of good what they call editorial reviews and endorsements. Because it's a different thing. Historical fiction is a different genre than my other books.
Do you, in particular, stay true to the kind of the more critical feedback, or do you try to really stand put on trying to see the only positive reviews?
Oh, well, it's not so much the reviews. I haven't had any bad reviews, by the way, on this book. But I will say and really advise people in the process to get beta readers to read your manuscript and not just your friends and family. It is really, and all your writing group. I mean, I actually, for this last book, went to a historical society in the UK, and I had a set of 12 beta readers read the manuscript before I did some final polish. And those were strangers. And I wanted to make sure that I got to validation that I was on the right track, and it did. So I was able to make some changes, and based on 12 people, with strangers who also like historical fiction to give me feedback. So it's important early on because after you follow the feedback and make changes and you're open to it, you'll end up with a much better book, which is the case. And I'm glad I did it because Enrico G has gotten nothing but rave reviews.
So going forward, how do you what are some obstacles that you face in these industries and have so far had the most difficulty trying to navigate?
I'd say that both industries have a lot of obstacles. I mean, people trying to get an agent, it's the publishing industry is challenged at the moment. It has been for a number of years. It's gotten more difficult. There's also a lot of people out there, producing books because of the self-publishing piece. And getting a publisher, I mean, that took me a while. I went on different tangents and finally opted for this my small publisher, Spring Cedars in Colorado. They're terrific. And I think that has a lot of people get disillusioned, trying to get a book out there. So I like to give everybody, four options as to what you can do, to get your word out there. But it's important to have your piece edited. I can't stress enough to make sure that you've had proofread, edited, and you've gotten beta readers. You just don't you have a product that's really marketable. Even then, it's still difficult, but you have a better chance. That's as far as publishing is concerned. As far as the films, getting financing can be hard. You really have to be plugged into I called a team or a tribe that is connected in the industry. Whether it doesn't have to be in LA, it can be in Atlanta, it can be in any city. There's always a film cooperative, or even get involved with student films and get your feet wet doing, short films first and work up to it. And then, of course, these days, things are in a turmoil with streamers and all the different outlets, but there are obstacles. There are a lot more opportunities now because you've got YouTube, you have other outlets for your work. You could do web series, which didn't exist when I first started. And so there's a lot more ability to show your creativity, and you don't need a lot of money, to do small things. So I encourage people to start small and work up from there, and get your networking. Networking is so critical. I'm on the ground when I'm in LA or anywhere else or in New York. I'm on the ground doing, one or two, three events a day, trying to get to find my new tribe, I should say.
In this industry, how do you deal with rejection?
You have to say, in some cases, rejection is protection. That's actually a line from my Sylvia book, the Sylvia the Matchmaker. So you may get rejected for a good reason. Maybe you shouldn't be involved with these people, right? So you have to look at it one way, that way. The second one is you have to have multiple projects. Because if you're just pushing one thing, which I did for a number of years, and you start getting rejected, but if you have a second or a third project going, you could just move on to the next one and make sure that that you find a home for them, whether it's books or films.
Now, going through your whole journey, is there anything that you would change differently, knowing now what you have learned and come to, since you've been in the business for a long time and there's been a lot of things that you've had to navigate and learn, would you go back and change anything knowing of what you know now?
Not necessarily. I think maybe I would have liked to have started earlier. I started at this quite late. I think the earlier you start, although I noticed that people already at a certain age have, small children to raise and all that. But either start really early or start later when you've got the time to devote to it because it's tough. I know it's tough. But I did it when I felt I could do it, and I was, there's not much I could change. But I just, had I started earlier, maybe I would be a different place today, possibly.
What are some upcoming projects that you have coming up in the works that you are able to share with my audience today?
Well, I have a feature film called Jane's Dust, which is about the asbestos poisoning and makeup. Everybody's heard about the talc and the baby powder, but this is a film that's social justice film based on a book by a doctor who was the main witness in these trials for the asbestos poisoning. So that's a drama, a courtroom drama, and that's being marketed at the moment. I also have a new book based on my play called Legal Gringa, which is about an undocumented Latina who finds out her bio dad is a neo-Nazi. So that was a very popular play. We had a sold out crowd for that, and as I think I mentioned, we did such a great exploration of the characters that I was compelled to write the book. And that book is going out now to find an agent. So hopefully that will happen soon.
To any of my listeners listening right now that maybe are wanting to start writing or get a career in writing, what advice do you have for them of how they can start becoming a writer, and what suggestions do you have for them?
We do workshops on this, and I bring in people that want to write. And I think the important is just start somewhere, even if it's a snippet, if it's a dialogue, if it's a line. Don't be afraid to write anything, and give yourself permission to write, even if it's not good, because it's all going to lead somewhere. It'll be a nugget you can use later on, and you can even record yourself now. You can also do auto writing. I mean, there's so many different ways you can get your words down. And the main thing is experiment and just go for it. Especially when you're talking about people want to write their memoirs, just start writing and in any form, whether you record your words, whether you just do a page at a time, just start and carry on and then get some feedback at whatever point when you're comfortable.
Well, Angela, I appreciate you so much for taking time out of your schedule to come on the podcast today to share your story and to share all your work with my audience today. For anyone that would like to take a further look at your work and they would love to follow you and support you on your journey, where can they go to learn more information?
My website, angelapage.com.
And I will put her website, of course, in the description box in the show notes. It is feel free to go check the show notes to find that information. Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials. You can reach out to me on Instagram and TikTok at southern.reads. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcasts. And feel free to also check out the website, noahspodcasts.com, to learn more about this show, as well as the other shows that I do. Feel free to follow and subscribe so you get notified of when new episodes like this come out in the future. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in to today's episode. Thank you to my dog Cooper for wanting to participate in the conversation today. And I appreciate you all so much. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I will see you in the next episode of Southern Reads.